All right, welcome to the Gloria Ferrer Masterclass. My name is Kyle Asmari. I'm the winemaker here at Gloria Ferrer. I'm here with Brad Kurtz, our vineyard director, and we have a very fun lineup here for you. We're going to talk about the history of Gloria Ferrer. We're going to get into a little bit about growing grapes and what it takes to do that here on our estate-grown vineyards. And we're going to talk about taking that from the vineyard to the winery and sparkling winemaking. And I see some wine in front of us, Brad. I think we should probably pop this open. I don't really want to wait. What do you think?
Today is the last day of harvest, so
it sounds like a good plan.
Party a little bit.
So let's get this going, and then I'm going to pass it over to Brad to introduce himself.
So my name's Brad, like Kyle said. I am the vineyard director here at Gloria Ferrer. This is my fourth harvest that we just wrapped up. A little bit about my background. I studied soil science in college, so I spent a lot of time in holes in the ground looking at dirt. And I have grown grapes all over the state of California, everything from Pinot Noir and Chardonnay over to Cabernet and Zinfandel and everything in between. I'm really happy to be at Gloria Ferrer now and settling in here after 4 vintages to be able to focus on sparkling wine and growing grapes for sparkling wine, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay specifically, and really getting to hone my craft a little bit.
And my name's Kyle Tamari. I'm a winemaker. I have made wine all over the state of California and gone from production levels of 1,000 cases a year all the way up to 1.8 million cases a year. I fell in love with sparkling wine mostly by drinking it and fell in love with making it because it's the only wine you get a second chance at. Once we ferment it, once we get a chance to pop that cork and see what's under the hood again, it becomes very, very fun, very technical winemaking, and just a lot of history here in sparkling wine here at Gloria Ferrer. So
well, cheers.
Cheers to the
and
Masterclass.
Let's dive right into this. So we're going to start out talking a little bit about the history of Gloria Ferrer. So Gloria Ferrer, the winery, was founded by the Ferrer family. The Ferrer family is an old Spanish family. They've been making sparkling wine in Spain since the 1860s, so quite a long time. I think they know what they're doing by now.
A lot of history.
A lot of history there. And our founders, Jose and Gloria Ferrer, their father had a dream of starting a winery in California and bringing their family business over to California and producing phenomenal world-class sparkling wines in California. Unfortunately, he passed during the Spanish Civil War, but his son, Jose, and his wife, Gloria, wanted to fulfill his dream. So they came out to California, and in 1982, they purchased this property where we're sitting right now in beautiful Sonoma, California. Just south of the city of Sonoma in what is now the Carneros region. And they planted vineyards and built a winery and started producing world-class sparkling wines right here in Sonoma County. So I think the important thing to really look at here is for me to look at how visionary this was, because at the time, this was not a wine region. Carneros did not exist. This property was all dairy farms, cattle pasture. This was not vineyard area. This is not.
This is a year before Carneros even became an AVA, is when the property was purchased. So very forward thinking for sure.
Yes, and so we have the timeline up here. There's a lot of stuff on here, and I think the important thing is to really talk about the heritage of the Ferrer family and the foresight they had to found this winery here. Gloria and Jose and their son Pedro are still very involved in the winery today. They're proud of what we're doing here. They're really, really excited about where we're going in the future.
Yeah.
And they're an amazing family.
Yeah, it's just a testament to the fact that they're committed to quality from the very start. They came out here to look at the best growing land for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, when no one else was doing this. So tell me a little bit about the varietals that we grow here on the estate.
So our main varietals are sparkling wine varietals, being Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Our estate here are dominated by Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. More than 95% is planted to that. We have 330 acres planted to vineyards on our 2 estate vineyards. So that's what we focus on growing. And the estate vineyards are really important to us here. I think it's part of the story of Gloria Ferrer is we are about this place. We're about this place that Jose Ferrer and his son Pedro have built and have developed and have really put their hearts and souls into. And this is the place where our wines show that sense of place.
Yeah. And for me, it's big, getting to work with not only yourself, the whole vineyard team, the whole winemaking team, but to have it be about something that you do from grape all the way to glass before it goes home. I mean, when we're talking about this is going home with the consumer in the bottle that it's fermented in, meaning the only time it's left that bottle is when it's in that glass that we just poured right there. And there's something truly special about this place and the grapes that we grow here. This was 40 years ago that the Ferrer family had the foresight to look forward and say, let's go ahead and plant varietals that at this time, everybody in the viticulture and grape growing world was saying, you're never going to grow grapes there. The soils aren't right. You can't grow Pinot Noir. It's too cold. You're never going to make it happen. And the Ferrer family said, we're going to take a risk with the intent of making the best sparkling wine that we possibly can, not just in the Sonoma region, but in the entire state of California.
And I think it's important. I mean, Gloria Ferrer was founded in 1984. This is our 40th harvest on the estate. So it's something to celebrate, and I think we're really excited about that. And I think something that we need to talk about too is the fact that it's been 40 years and we're looking towards the next 40 years. So we're going to talk a little bit about sustainability during this discussion. And to me, sustainability really means, and the core of sustainability is to be able to continue what you're doing and be able to do it at the same level for a long period of time. So we've done 40 years on this estate and we're still producing amazing wines. And I think looking forward to the next 40, 80, 100 years, we want to be able to keep that going. So when we talk about sustainability during this discussion, I think that's important, that's where we're coming from on this, is that Gloria Ferrer has built a legacy as a winery of producing amazing sparkling wines, but we want to be able to keep doing it going forward, and that's why we talk about sustainability.
Yeah, and everything that we're doing in the vineyard and winery is really just to make sure that we're leaving it better for the next class of vineyard managers, the next class of winemakers coming up through here, just as the Ferrer family left this for you and I, to steward this brand in. Being this is the 40th anniversary, we also have some fun projects here, one of which we're going back and throwing it a little bit historical. So we have a method ancestral coming from our estate vineyards this year, which I'm very excited about.
It's a very exciting project. We tasted it today.
Yeah, we popped a bottle. Just finished fermenting today, so it's a little new, but we're excited to have this released this year.
It's going to be a cool wine. I'm really excited about
and
that.
And then Brad and the team and I will be producing a 40th anniversary wine as well, where we're going to kind of take a riff on what has been done historically and where we're going in the future. So with that, I'd really like to talk to you a little bit about everything that we're doing in the vineyard regarding sustainability. We've been farming sustainably since 2017. So this is a project that was started before you and I were here. It's in the ethos of our DNA. This is what we do, is to make sure that we're taking care of the land. But not only are we doing that, but we've been pursuing some new organic certification as well. So I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about how things have changed since you started here and what we've been doing since 2021.
Yeah, so in 2017, we were first certified as a sustainable winery and vineyard. So we have both the certification for the vineyard and for the winery. That certification looks at everything from the way you grow grapes to the way you treat your employees to your water usage in the winery and in the vineyards. It's a full, all-encompassing view of how your winery operates. And if you're operating in a sustainable manner, if you're managing your resources properly, if you're looking at how you're treating your employees so you don't have massive turnover, all of that stuff. So that's really important to look at. And that's a certification that we continue to do every year and we're audited on every single year. So I think that's really important. And I don't want to gloss over that, is that's something that every one of our wines has that on the bottle now. And that's something that I'm very proud of, because it's not only something that happened in 2017, but it's something we continue to work on. And part of the requirements for that is continual improvement. So it's not just hit the bare minimum standards and you're good forever. You have to improve on it every year. And we have to do something to elevate ourselves every single year. But I think,
and within that, so talk to me a little bit, because we've taken it from certified sustainable and we're taking it and going even further than that. So
yes,
talk to me about what you're doing with the things that we're doing for organic farming.
Yeah, so
it's very different.
When I came on in 2021, we had the discussion of, are we ready to move on to the next level? So on the vineyard side, which is my world, we really wanted to take things from a sustainable aspect up to the next level. Farming organically was the natural next step. We are an estate-driven brand. Our wines come from our own vineyards. We farm our vineyards and we produce grapes that become our wines. So we have full control from the ground up, and I think that's something we'll touch on later, but we have full control from the ground up over our product. And I think it's important that because these vineyards are all we have to take good care of them.
Yeah, and it's something that's truly, a blessing as a winemaker to have the ability to go out and walk with the crew and walk with you and say, this is what we're looking for in these wines, and taste these wines with the crew, which is something we do every year, right? Is we put it full circle for the crew and say, we understand we're asking you to do a lot more because we're asking for organic farming, we're asking for sustainable farming, we're asking for more touch points in the vineyard. But here's the proof. Taste these wines as they're getting great scores, as they're getting better. We're getting more weight on the palate. We're getting more viscosity. We're getting wines that are truly world-class wines based on the fact that we're taking care of the place that the grapes are grown.
Yeah, and I think, we wanted to look from it, not just here's the rules of organic farming, we have to follow the rules of organic farming. We wanted to look at a more holistic approach, climate smart farming practices. How can we put carbon back in the soil? How can we reduce our carbon emissions? Farming can be a very carbon intense activity to do. It can be a very extractive way to make a living. You're pulling resources out of the ground. We want to do the opposite of that. We want to put resources back, and we want to build the soils. We want to improve the environment. So things like adopting electric tractors. So, slowly phasing out our diesel usage. Things like bringing livestock, sheep into the vineyards to graze our vineyards to help put that carbon and cycle nutrients back into our soils.
And they're pretty cute too.
Yeah.
Some of them taste good, which is great.
Yes. But people do love the sheep. The sheep are a crowd favorite for sure. People love coming out in the winter when the sheep are out here. Our on-site composting operation, we pick our grapes, they process the grapes, they squeeze the juice out, but you're left with a lot of leftover product. Instead of that going to a landfill somewhere, we take it on site, we compost it, we mix it with green waste, and it goes back to fertilize our vineyard. It's a very full circle, closed loop system to where nothing goes to waste.
I really love that part because for me, coming from wineries where we processed a large amount of grapes and we used to just send it all off. We used to get these big 40-yard containers, and I got here for the first harvest.
That's the norm.
That's the norm. And I got here for the first harvest, and I'm going, okay, when do we get the pumice containers? Do I need to call? Do I need to do this stuff? And it was really awesome to see the crew say, no, we have this tractor right here that we take it straight from the press. Like we're literally dumping the press and taking it right up to the compost pile for you.
Yep.
So, bringing it full circle, I think, is really important.
We finished harvest today, and the compost is already cooking. So we're ready to put it out in a couple of weeks.
Vintage 25 starts today, is what you're saying.
Vintage 25 starts today. There's a lot that goes into this. It's not just the organic farming. We have a thing about carbon-free electricity. So, we purchase our electricity from sources that are zero carbon neutral. So that way we are not, it takes a lot of electricity to keep a winery cool, to cool tanks, to pump water, all of that stuff to pump
run all our presses, run
everything. So trying to make sure that we're not becoming part of the problem. We're actually trying to become part of a solution to the problem. I've been farming grapes for 11 years now, and I'd say maybe this year is the first year that I can really say has been an average year. It feels as if it's been feast or famine every year that I've been farming grapes, where it's been either drought or heat wave or flooding or, historically cold.
Small crop, too much
crop. This has been it's been like a breath of fresh air, because it's like, you hear all these people talk about, this is what the average weather's like. We want to make sure with this changing climate, we're not contributing to the problem.
Yeah.
And being able to produce world-class sparkling wines here for a long
time. And I think it really means that you have to be much more active in the vineyard. right?
Yes.
You and I are out there all the time. It doesn't start just when we're picking. You know, you and I don't just go out there the day before the pick and say, hey, look what's going on. We're out there talking about pruning strategy. We're out, and, you know, for those of you that don't know, we sit 6 feet from each other. So oftentimes we're getting in a whole lot of trouble naturally just talking to each other and saying, hey, what if we did something like this? What if we're talking about fruit spacing, or we're talking about pruning strategy, or we're talking about how much crop we want to set on a certain block? So really to work so closely hand in hand and say, not only is it going in the vineyard, but we're going to translate it. You know that when it hits the crush pad, we're going to translate it right to what we're doing in the winery, because we're growing these grapes for a specific purpose, for a specific wine that we're trying to make, and year over year see an increase in quality as we go. But that does require a lot more boots on the ground. We can't just go out and spray synthetic herbicides or synthetic pesticides and take care of a quote unquote problem if they find it.
You know, when you're a conventional farmer, and I farmed conventionally for many years, and when you're a conventional farmer, your main tool is to, you know, open a jug of, you know,
of
a
something,
jug
of something.
and you're spraying. So when your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you have to kind of relearn how to do things. You have to use the systems, the natural systems that are out there to be able to protect your vineyards and to be able to fertilize your vineyards and to be able to balance your vines. And I see now, after 3 full years of doing this, 3.5 years total, 3 full vintages of this, I see the vines really balancing themselves out nicely. I see the quality of the wines continuing to elevate. The yields and the crop level have dropped a little bit, but the concentration in the wines has increased dramatically. And I'm in there, like you said, we sit 6 feet apart from each other. Kyle's working on a blend. He might come over to my desk, hey, try this, check this out. I'm tasting these wines every day, and I'm seeing the evolution, and I'm seeing the beauty of sparkling wine is there's nowhere to hide.
Yep.
There's no oak.
You got no blankets
You got
to cover.
no oak. There's no malolactic fermentation. There's nothing to hide from. There's no tannin to be hide behind. There's nothing to hide behind.
No tricks, no gimmicks.
There's no tricks. There's no gimmicks. It's just a beautiful blank canvas, and the grapes shine through. So if you don't have good quality grapes, you're not going to have a good quality wine.
So being that we are, you know, first and foremost, Pinot Noir dominant blends, right? And we have some Chardonnay in here as well in specific percentages for specific purposes. But we are in Carneros. So I want to talk to you a little bit and have a conversation about why this area, what makes Gloria Ferrer unique, why this property specifically. 40 years ago, what made this property stand out to the Ferrers?
Yeah, so our goals in growing grapes for sparkling wine are different than still wine. So it's important to think about it that way. If I'm growing Cabernet in Napa Valley, I'm looking for thin soils, rocky soils, well-drained soils. I'm looking for maybe west exposures.
A lot of sun.
Lots of sun. I'm looking for areas where the vines are going to be stressed, right? During specific times in the years, you need to have some stress on your vines, specifically between when the fruit sets after bloom and when the fruit starts to ripen during veraison, when the sugars start to accumulate in the grape.
So we're talking somewhere between, like, you know, May and July.
May and July, you want a little bit of stress, maybe a lot of stress, depending on what your goals are. And that is not the case with sparkling wine.
That is everything that I don't want when we're making sparkling wine.
So your goal for growing, let's say, a Napa Valley Cabernet is you want small berries, you want high sugars, you don't want aggressive acidity, you want lots of tannin, lots of color, lots of extraction in your wines.
Yep.
We don't want any of that.
Yeah, I want acid that melts your enamel off your teeth. I want big berries. I want even crop yield. I want no color. I want no stress. And I want it all, and I want it now.
No bitterness, none of that. And so our goals are different, right? So we have to look for sites that are going to provide that to us. So we have this site here at Gloria Ferrer where we have relatively deep soils. We have deep soils. We have these high water holding capacity soils. I mentioned earlier my background's in soils. I was sitting in a soil pit on a vineyard we're getting ready to plant for about an hour today. So you know, that's something that I get excited about. But high water holding capacity soil. So our dominant soils here are clay loam. So they hold a ton of water, and the roots can go way down deep. Pinot Noir I don't know if you've heard, it's pretty high maintenance variety.
We've seen that.
Yeah, Cabernet can take a beating. Pinot Noir cannot. Pinot Noir.
You look at Pinot Noir and it ripens the wrong way. It
Yeah,
just
so
doesn't want to.
it's a difficult grape to grow, so it doesn't like to be stressed. It likes a very low stress environment, especially when you're making sparkling wine with it. It's important to know that your vines, you don't want them to be exposed to the sunlight, right? You don't want to have any sunburn that might create bitterness. You don't want it to develop a ton of tannin and color. You want to make those berries, keep those vines happy, keep the fruit shaded. You don't want to lose basal leaves because the vines are stressed, the lower leaves that protect the fruit. So our goals are different. So the first thing would be the soils, right? That's something about this site that's beautiful for growing sparkling wine, or the deep, fertile, high water holding capacity soils.
And we have a lot of different soils across the property. So it's not like we just have one soil and everything ends up the same. We have a number of different, I mean, they're individual vineyards within a larger block. I mean, that's exactly what we're looking at.
Within one block, you could have potentially different soils, but the dominant soils here on this site are these deep clay loam soils. We have, like I mentioned before, 2 ranches. One of our ranches has more hillside sites. One of our ranches has more, it's more valley floor. And so there's different wines that come out of there, and there's different things those can bring to a blend. The other thing that I would say is the location of Carneros. So Carneros is a coastal region. It's a cool climate region, and I would argue we're in one of the coldest spots in Carneros. So we're sitting on the very far west side of Carneros and the very south side of Carneros. So what that means is our vineyards are getting 2 coastal influences, one from the San Francisco-San Pablo Bay and one from Bodega Bay in the Pacific Ocean to the west.
Which we can feel every day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
So what happens is we have the bay, you can see the bay from the Vista Terrace. You can see, if you come out to our tasting room and you sit up on the tasting room, you can see the bay. From Circle Bar Ranch, from our other ranch, you can literally, you're right on top of the water.
Yeah, it's like 7 miles as the crow flies. You can see a straight path.
It's one of those things where the fog rolls in. You know, San Francisco's famous for its fog. The fog rolls in on the San Francisco Bay and comes right up to our vineyards. Our home ranch sits like 4 feet above sea level. So that fog just rolls in and sits right on our vines and keeps them cool. That happens almost every morning. That fog hangs out. It keeps that cold coastal air, and it hangs out until 9, 10 o'clock in the morning.
Starts to roll back out.
Yeah, you have your jacket on when you get here in the morning. You have your jacket on until about 9, 10 o'clock. The sun comes out, the fog burns off, it rolls back out to the ocean. Sun comes out, we get some beautiful ripening weather from like 10 a.m. until like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Right when it starts to get really hot out, we're in California after all, it can get hot here. And then the wind comes in. So because where we're situated up against the Sonoma Mountains, right up on the other side of the Petaluma Gap, we have this breeze. The Pacific Ocean stays about 55 degrees year round. So even when it's 95 degrees in interior California, it's 55 degrees over the Pacific Ocean. So that warm air pulls that cold air right across us and cools us down. And you can see the temperature plummet right around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that's when
jackets go back on. Yep.
So you always have to be dressed appropriately and prepared for anything when you come to work here.
Whenever anybody comes by and we're always wearing vests as we're going out, it was like, how are you not hot? And it's like, well, you don't understand. We're going from the winery where it's cold to the vineyard where it's warm, and then the vineyard is cold in the afternoon, and you can't do anything about it. So we're just used to wearing layers.
For sure. But it's great for growing grapes because as it starts to get hot, it cools back down. It keeps those grapes at a temperature that they want to be at, helps maintain the acidity in the grapes, but just enough sunlight to be able to ripen them. And it helps extend our season because we pick sparkling wine grapes at such low ripeness levels, so low sugar levels, high acidity levels. We want to extend that season and extend that hang time as long as possible to develop those flavors, develop that concentration in the wine, and that's why it's important to have a cooler climate.
And then, so we're sitting here at the home ranch at the winery. So the winery is right in the top part of this ranch on this vineyard map that you can see. So let's talk a little bit about, 1, the soils that we have here, and 2, what is this ranch planted mostly to, and how do we look at this map as we're going forward? Like, this is a map that you and I take for granted. We use this every single day. It sits right above the desk. We're often, pulling it down and circling things or drawing,
referencing stuff,
or drawing weird lines so we can split pick things or go crazy and have a whole bunch of fun. But let's talk a little bit about the split that you can see here. We got the map up. We have the key down there, so you can see the varietals that we grow. So let's talk about what we grow and what the soils are here.
Yeah, so obviously the home ranch, you can see the dominant variety planted is Pinot Noir. Most of our blends are Pinot Noir dominant, so it makes sense that we would have mostly Pinot Noir. I think it's
great how that works out.
2/3 Pinot Noir, if I'm gonna, guess off the top of my head.
Yeah, just eyeballing it.
The numbers, in a while, but it's about 2/3 Pinot Noir.
Well, and we're redeveloping it, so that number shifts kind of year by year based on needs.
Get pulled out,
Yeah.
planted, that number can shift slightly. But it is more Pinot Noir than Chardonnay. And there is a little Pinot Blanc as well. Pinot Blanc being kind of the sister grape to Pinot Noir, works well with both still wine and sparkling wine. And we produce both a sparkling Pinot Blanc and a still Pinot Blanc sold directly from the winery. This is an amazing property for growing Pinot Noir. My thought is that the soils are really what do it here. So as you get around the winery, you go from the top of the hill, so to the west of the winery on this map, you get a little bit rockier soils, you get a little more hillside, but the beauty of it is it's all east facing, it's all northeast facing. So in the afternoon, you don't get baked by the sun.
We get that soft sunlight rather than that really harsh UV in the afternoon.
Even in the hills that are even or above the winery to the west of the winery, it's all facing the east. So they don't get that harsh sunlight, so they stay kind of cool, and they don't get as stressed as they would if it was flipped and they were facing west. But we do produce some still wines, a little bit of still wine from there, but it's mostly sparkling on this ranch. And then as you go a little bit below the winery, I always talk about that being my little sweet spot, the
Goldilocks zone. We talk about it all the time.
Where there's not too much clay and there's not too much rock. The soils are really deep. The vines can really sink their roots deep into those soils, and that's really where the bread and butter of our wines are. Our best lots every year of sparkling wine come from these sites in kind of the core chunk middle of the property, and that's just the most beautiful soils for sparkling wine.
And you can taste it when they're in the fermenter. When we're going through these, we have the fortune to be able to keep all of these vineyard blocks separate. So when we're looking at this and we're saying, all right, what can this vineyard site actually do? You really see, even if you taste these things blind, there is a clear, distinct difference between blocks that come right below the winery to right above to something that comes on a little bit heavier clay. Not that the wines are bad, they just showcase such different terroir, such different character.
I think they're more fruit. They show more fruit.
There's a lot more fruit.
Maybe not as much weight and concentration, but they have that huge pop of fruit. So as you get closer, further east, the soils get a little bit heavier clay, which is a little counterintuitive because you think of clay as holding a ton of water, but they crack the soils.
And it doesn't want to release it.
They want to hold on to that water. They don't want to give it up to the vine. So they can be a little more stressed there. And you know what? Those sites provide something different to the blend. I think, the step to the west of the winery and the step to the east of the winery, it all has their place. Maybe you get a little more concentration from the rocky soils in the hill. You get a little more fruit from the highway. I like the middle because it kind of gives you a little bit of both, but it all has their purpose, and sparkling wine's all about blending it.
It's really a treat to blend these wines because even if there's a hole, there's always something that you can fill it with.
Yes.
Which is never something, I've never had a portfolio that's so complete that I can look from top to bottom and say, we can create a wine that feels seamless. We can create a wine that has weight. It's got fruit. You can go down the checklist of everything we look for.
If it's got a short finish, if it's got a missing mid palate, if it's missing some fruit, if it's missing some weight, there's
something else I can play with to put in and say, this is a well-crafted wine where we're actually doing this with intentionality. We're making this wine with a specific purpose in mind.
Yeah.
So we also have another ranch as well. Yeah. So it's about a mile down the road? Mile and a half?
A mile and a half, yeah. So our Circle Bar Ranch is a little bit further south, so it's a little closer to the bay. It actually is a little bit more marine influence, a little bit colder site. Maybe not so cold that it won't ripen sparkling wine grapes, but it is definitely about a week behind the home ranch. So during harvest,
which is such a blessing.
Which is such a blessing for us because we do sparkling wine, right? And that's the vast majority of what we do.
I mean, this year we had what, a 3-week harvest? It was like 19 days, 13 picking days, and if all of that were to get ripe at the exact same time, it becomes logistically very taxing.
Yeah.
So having that kind of different.
Physically and logistically.
Physically, logistically, mentally, right?
Mentally,
You just run out of steam.
Yeah,
so
out of steam.
it's really nice to have that. A week doesn't sound like much, but a week in grape growing it's light years, right? So having just the little bit of time, being Pinot Noir dominant, having Pinot that ripens 4 to 7 days later than what we have here on the home ranch, not only gives us different styles to play with and different fruit profiles to play with when we get the grapes into the winery, but it gives us a little bit of time to smooth out that curve of harvest where we don't have something that everything crashes all at once and it all tastes exactly the same.
And we're panicking to try and get everything in the winery.
Correct.
We have some time to make sure we can get it at the exact right time when
Yes.
we need to pick it. So yeah, if you look at the map, it's very clear that Pinot Noir reigns king at Circle Bar. So because it is a cooler site, it's a little closer to the bay. The fog hangs out a little bit longer. It is a little bit more driven by those hillside soils.
Yeah.
It's right along the same slope as the home ranch is. So it does have a lot of similar soils to the home ranch, especially to the west of the winery, up on the hills. It's got similar soils there, but it also has those valley floors. So it's kind of rolling hills. You get different exposures, you get different soils, and it's really a nice place to where there's a bunch of little pockets. And we do produce some still wines from there as well. In fact, the majority of our still wines come from there, being
with the exception of one block.
with the exception of one block, it's really the backbone of where our still wine production comes from.
Yeah.
And I think that's driven by the soils that we have there, being not those deep clay soils, which are so beautiful for sparkling wine, but our goals for still wine, like I mentioned, a little bit different.
Yeah, and you can see it in the sparkling wines we make off that property. A lot of times those become the components that we put in tiny little pieces because we have more tannin, we have more color. We need to be careful when we're making those wines that we don't overpower the delicacy and the finesse that we get off the home ranch. So it's great to have these two sites, and you can really taste them side by side. Two clones, we have the same clones sometimes grown on the exact different properties, and they're two completely different wines.
Yeah.
So it's really true that site reigns supreme. So when the Ferrers were looking at these properties, it's fantastic that they picked these two properties for us to work with, because it just gives us so many tools in our toolbox to be able to actually make wines. Our hands are not tied by anything except for the ability to grow our own fruit to the best of our ability.
And I think the other beautiful thing about having your own estate vineyards for sparkling wine specifically is the time aspect. So when we're picking grapes, we don't have to ship our grapes across the state.
Nope.
We don't even have to ship it across the county. Our grapes come in
mostly on tractor. Yeah.
So the tractor, we pick the grapes. It's all picked by hand at night. We start picking at 2 a.m. The grapes, they fill up a trailer, and the trailer comes right into the scale, and it's right in the press before the sun even comes up.
Yep.
And when it comes to sparkling wine, I mean, you're the expert, but time and temperature are really important.
That's it. The faster you can get it from the time you pick it, the faster you can get it into the press and into the settling tank, the higher quality wine you're going to make. You don't, just as with still wine, you want that extraction, you want to get that slow extraction for things to go along a long curve. I want to take the juice out from that skin as fast as I can and off the seeds, because those are all the things that we create that give us a little bit of a different mouthfeel, tannin, those catechins that have that seed tannin that get a little bitter. We don't want that. So the fact that, you said we start picking it too, our crew's usually here at 3:30 weighing stuff in. The second that it's weighed in, we're already here. You're calling me saying, hey, I'm 50% through the block. I think we have this much left. We're already making plans on the winery side so that the second, 4:30 hits, we're getting grapes into the press. The second we have a full press load, it's pressed out and ready to go, which is phenomenal in terms of quality aspect of it. You can't get better than that.
And I'll tell you, from a farmer's perspective, it's amazing to work at a winery where they can take such good care of the fruit, because you work,
all year long. All year long.
2024 is done, but 2025 vintage starts tomorrow.
So it's right now.
It starts tomorrow, and
Yep.
I will be, we'll be caring for these grapes essentially for a full year, and then it's like our babies that we hand off to you and hand off to the crew in the winery, and you want to see it treated well, and you want to see them really taken care of, and make sure we get them picked and we get them into the press as quickly as possible. I think is super important.
And it goes all the way through of everything we do here at Gloria Ferrer. Talking about sustainability, it's not just about talking about what we're doing with the land, what we're doing with the winery. It's talking about the people as well. And we have a very tenured crew that's got a lot of experience. It's a blessing to have. I mean, you have a team of 22 in the vineyard?
22 in the vineyard.
22 in the vineyard, and average tenure being somewhere north of 15 years.
At least 15 years.
So we're talking people that have tended to these vines and seen the change, seen what is going on, and seen what goes into it.
And most of these people have planted the vineyards.
Yes.
Farming, so they know. I mean, they know all the weak spots. They know the spots that have issues, and since I've come on board, I've done a lot of training with the crew to be able to identify pests, diseases, things like that. Because now we're organic, we can't rely on a spray to fix problems. I need my crew, who are my eyes and ears out in the vineyards, to be able to find these problems when they're small. They're out there touching every vine. We prune, we have 300,000 vines. We prune every single one of them by hand. We pick every single one of them by hand. Pulling leaves, lifting wires, shoot thinning, all of that's done by hand on every single vine. And this crew is my eyes and ears out there. So having such a tenured crew is super important, because they're able to be, ring the bells, the alarm bells when something's wrong, or be able to tell me, hey, you should think about doing this differently. We pruned it this way last year. Why don't we try doing, leaving more buds, less buds, whatever, training it differently in the future.
Yeah, and it's nice that, you and I can cover a lot of ground. We can get through a lot of blocks in a day, being that we are state grown. We're all right here. We're within, 3 square miles of the winery.
Walk down to one of the blocks.
Yeah, I love to go down to walk down and take a look at what's going on. So
when you walk from your office into the vineyards, it's not a bad.
It is, but having those extra 44 set of eyes on everything that's going on, being that we have extra people looking at this and taking the same care. The greatest thing is I know that they're taking the same care that you and I would if we're out there doing it. Yeah. And the same thing with our crew here in the winery. Victor, our director of operations, and our whole winery crew, they transfer exactly what's going on in the vineyard to the winery. So from the second these vines go on the ground, as we're redeveloping them, everybody is on the same page, knowing that at the end goal is to put the best quality wine in this bottle that we possibly can. And it takes all of us to do that. It's crazy how many hands, when you think about it, how many hands touch 300,000 vines and 840-ish thousand bottles of tirage a year. We go crazy, right? So it's nice to be able to look at this and say, this is a culmination of every part of the team, to then going to selling it as well.
Yeah.
So.
And I think it's for us as a vineyard team, it's really, for me, I think I've worked with companies in the past where you're bringing on vineyard management companies, you're bringing on contract labor crews. They don't know the vineyards. Nope. You have a different, you might, when you're pruning your vineyard, you might have one crew one day, a different crew the next day. You might never see a crew again. You can't take the time to properly train them and get the benefit of properly training them and having that estate crew, both in the winery, because that's true in the winery, I know that as well,
yep,
and the vineyards, to be able to have that year-round crew that we really can invest in to help us with our goals.
Yeah, and our goal is to just make the best quality method traditional sparkling that we can.
So why don't you talk about traditional method?
So the traditional method is one of the oldest methods of making sparkling wine, and it is widely considered the best method of making sparkling wine. Because of the fact that we only put the wine in the bottle that is going to be sold in. We don't transfer this wine. We don't infuse it with any carbonation. We don't Charmat method it. We don't ferment it in a tank. It is fermented in that bottle. The benefit of that is you have fermentation size, which is much smaller. You also have extended contact with the yeast, and that's something here at Gloria Ferrer that we are really about. Our wines are built to last. They are built for aging. They're approachable when they're young, yes, but we really put the time and effort into everything that we have when you're growing fruit to say, some of our cuvées lay down for 5 years. Some of them lay down for 7 years before we actually disgorge them and put them out there. So for those of you that don't know, the traditional method only happens when you put it in the bottle. So we ferment the base wines in a tank. That's what we just did this harvest. We then go ahead and look at blending. As a group, we'll look at each of our blends individually. And then once we make that blend, you have to tirage it. And tirage is the process of putting a yeast culture with some sugar in the base wine. Benefit of that is the yeast really like to eat sugar. So they're really good at it. They're really good at doing that. The byproduct is they create some bubbles. Those bubbles have nowhere to go because they're in a bottle. Once we get that, that's how you get the actual pressure in there. We then lay it down what's called surlot or aging, and we age it for a specific amount of time depending on the wine that we're producing. Sonoma Brut is something like 18 to 24 months. Our Royal Cuvée Rosé is somewhere around 24 to 36. Carneros Cuvée is as long as 7. Royal Cuvée is somewhere in between, around 4 to 5 years in tirage before we disgorge it. Now you've got a problem, right? We've got all of that spent yeast cells in the bottle. So we have to get it out of the bottle. So we actually have some riddling machines, and riddling is the process of taking those bottles that are on their side, and we're gonna put them and gently agitate that yeast all the way down the side of the bottle until it ends up in a tiny little plug right at the end of the neck. And then we freeze that neck, we pop that ice plug out of there, and now we've got space to put our dosage in. And this is where I really love making sparkling wine, because this is where the craft really comes in. You can look at wines year over year. You can really create a style and craft a wine that has a sense of place and a sense of purpose. So dosage is only about 2%, but it is probably the biggest 2% that we do. We make a liqueur where we actually take a base wine and we put sugar in it to a specific volume so that I can add the minimal amount possible. But what we're starting to do here at Gloria Ferrer now is to what we're calling dose with intentionality. There's no program to this. You've sat in how many of these dose tastings with us?
I can't count.
Yeah,
it's too many to count.
You go through them and it becomes
and
nauseating
with
at best.
With the same wine, sometimes it can be three, four trials.
Yeah, sometimes it gets way too geeky about this, but
I'm like, Kyle, make a
decision.
Already.
That's generally when the consensus comes. With these changes, we're maybe making a 0.5% change, 1/4% change. I mean, we get as granular as really splitting hairs with these cuvées because it is the culmination of what we're doing.
It's your final chance to make an adjustment.
And it's really a blessing to have something where we can work all the way through from the grape to the glass, and it's all controlled here at the estate. So, making these wines is truly a labor of love and a labor of passion, and it started with the Ferrer family, and it's continued with the team here now of things that we're doing to create these wines that are truly showing a sense of place.
So my question for you is, obviously the traditional method is really intense when it comes to all the steps involved. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. I know it's very labor intensive. I know it takes a lot of time. We talked about many years of aging in the bottle. What's the benefit of doing that versus a different method of producing sparkling wines?
The benefit here is that you have the wine sold in the bottle that it's created in, but you have increased contact time with the yeast. If we were to do this with a different method and have it fermented in a tank or force carbonated or any of these things, you would not have that contact with the yeast. And that contact with the yeast provides a number of benefits. It slows oxidation. It gives you a different flavor profile. It can increase mouthfeel. And it just gives you a chance to create a wine that you are not limited to the timeline of wines that don't have that yeast as protection. When that yeast is in the bottle, and even when they're done fermenting, they're very good at sucking up all the oxygen that's in that bottle. And as you know, time from picking to pressing matters, but because of the oxidation. So now that the wine is finished, it matters even more, where we have oxygen starts to degrade certain components in the wine. It makes it fresh. You lose the freshness, you lose acidity, you can lose a lot of different things. So having that yeast there to consume and protect that wine from oxidation is a true benefit that you don't get with any other method of making sparkling wine whatsoever.
So my next question for you as the Gloria Ferrer winemaker, we talk about how important it is to be estate grown and how our wines really show a sense of place when it comes to our estate vineyards. What do you think is that signature of Gloria Ferrer wines? What is it about our estate vineyards, the way we do things here, our traditional method, all of that? What do you see in that? What are your tasting notes that you get in your wines that make you feel like this is a wine from Gloria Ferrer? This is a wine from our vineyards made in the way our style of making sparkling wines. What are those signature characteristics in a Gloria Ferrer sparkling wine?
Number one, it's the purity of fruit. Being that we are Pinot Noir driven in our blends, and Pinot Noir and Chardonnay both bring different things to the blend, and we use them strategically for different purposes. Pinot Noir brings that really lush, ripe fruit, And it really gives a softness and an elegance and a length to.
Yeah, I always feel like the Pinot Noir wines are really luxurious.
They're unctuous and they're very voluptuous, right? And they're coating.
Yeah.
But
with that red fruit character, a very sexy wine.
Very. And the thing is, they're beautiful in their youth, but once that fruit component starts to fade, there's not a whole lot of structure behind it. So we use Chardonnay in the place of that, whereas Chardonnay doesn't jump out of the glass at you and scream and grab you with these really juicy fruit aromatics. What it does is it creates everything I mentioned earlier, where maybe there's a touch of a hole, maybe it's not as weighty on the mid palate. Chardonnay adds that structure. I always think when we're making these blends that Chardonnay is the framing and Pinot Noir is the fruit and everything and all of this elegance that you hang off of that frame to make it very beautiful wines that are, Gloria Ferrer's signature is purity of fruit from that Pinot Noir, from our estate. Because again, as you're tasting these wines that we're making off of the vineyards, you notice when a wine just has the most pure expression of Carneros and of Pinot Noir. It's red fruit, it's juicy, it's lively, it's aromatic.
Yeah,
there's
I feel
white
like
flowers.
Lively for sure is a word that I always use to describe our wines is being traditional method. They've got a lot of bubbles, it jumps, and those bubbles would lift up the aromatics in the wine, and it just really pops, without using a cliche, it pops on your palate and in your nose when you're sniffing the wine, when you're smelling the wine. It's something that just jumps out of the glass.
And I think the best thing that you just said is those bubbles do deliver that right to you. It's the tasting experience. So the thing was making sparkling wine, and it took me so long to kind of turn these dials to figure it out how to do it correctly, is if there's something pleasing in a base wine, when you put bubbles in it, it's going to be more pleasing.
Yeah.
If there's something that's displeasing in a base wine, be it astringency, be it bitterness, be it something else, it's going to be even more because that bubble is going to deliver it turned up to 11. So really being able to have clones that were selected here, and this is something that you and I are actually continuing to work on here, is we have clones that are specific to Gloria Ferrer for specific sparkling wine production. And the teams prior to us actually spent the time to go over to Champagne, look at what grapes they were growing in Champagne with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and import 12 clones of Pinot Noir,
12 of Pinot and six
of Chardonnay.
Yep.
And this is something that we're continuing as a management team and a vineyard winemaking team now to plant them again on the property.
And I think it's something that, since these clones started to be planted in, 2014 is when we started getting our first kind of sizable production quantities of them. We've really seen the quality go. I mean, these are clones where they're selected for their attributes for making sparkling wine. Most Pinot Noir clones or selections, or most Chardonnay clones or selections are selected for qualities that are beneficial for still wine.
Yeah.
So, having these and, us being one of the only growers or wineries in California to have these, it really sets our style now. It's really driving our style. I did want to ask you a little bit to touch on the grading of our wines and how that affects our blending of the base wines. So maybe dive in a little bit to the background on the grading and how that happens, and then how that influences the blending portion of our base wine production.
Yeah, this is really where it culminates, everything coming together from vineyard to winery is in this grading tasting. This is kind of like our Super Bowl every year. You and I,
it's my report card every year.
You and I get real amped up in the lead up to this.
It's coming soon, so I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be a couple weeks that we're going to go ahead and do this. And what we do is we take each lot of wine that we've made, we calibrate everybody with some standards. We say, okay, we're going to all agree that these wines that we've set out in front of us be A, B, C, just like grades, just like you would get when you were in school. And we can, fudge a little bit, A minus, B plus, and we can split hairs and we get really into the weeds with that. But the culmination is A, B, and C. And what we look at within these wines is, how is the vineyard block itself performing? I mentioned earlier that we are fortunate enough that we get to keep these blocks separate here. Yeah. So we get to grade and look at not only how well the wine tastes, but how well the vineyard is performing. It's the first indicator if a vineyard is not doing too well and needs to be thinking about redevelopment. Grapevines don't live forever.
Or if we need to do something next year to change it, if we're not getting concentration, if we had too much sunlight. And this is all done blind.
Yeah. So we take each wine, we look at it blind. as a winemaking, viticulture, management team, and we all sit down and we kind of come to a consensus.
It's like
These
20
wines,
bottles out in front of us.
Yep, we got 20 glasses.
Bottle 1 through 20.
And we go through, and it is a grueling experience because, you know, tasting sparkling base wines is not, it's not like drinking finished wine. There's
Yeah,
a
we
lot
get to
of things that
break
you
out the Sensodyne toothpaste
yes.
after. Yeah.
Yeah, take little breaks, get little water
Tums are
rinses,
key.
Tums. Yes, eat a lot of bananas.
Yep.
So make sure you're prepped and ready. We have a whole training regimen that we go through for this grading tasting. But essentially what we're looking for
We're
is
basically elite athletes. is what you're saying.
I would go as far as to say it is the athlete in us that just really takes the
Yes,
cake.
I like to think so.
What we'd look for is, how is this wine performing? Does it have weight on the palate? And when I say weight, are we looking at something along the lines of, does this feel like skim milk or is it more like whole milk?
Yeah.
Does it go as far as olive oil? Do we have a lot of viscosity?
Yeah.
Is it weighty and hefty, and does it roll all around the sides of your mouth?
Does it coat your whole
Does
mouth?
it coat the whole mouth? Or how's the finish? Is it long? Does it keep going after you've spit all that wine out? Does it still stay with you on your palate? Is there a persistence there? How about the aromatics? Are they complex or are they simple? Because it doesn't have to be one or the other, but each wine has a purpose. So
There's a spectrum.
There's a spectrum that we're looking at, and why we grade these is so that when we sit down, one, it's for health of the vineyard, and to see how our viticulture.
And my report card.
It's a report card of what's going on in the vineyard and how well we did in the vineyard and winery in the year, right? But it's also to say, when we sit down to blend these wines, where we have all of these different individual vineyard blocks, what wines should be on the table for that specific wine. When you're blending Carneros Cuvée, there better only be A-grade wines on the table.
Yeah, A-grade components. So when we make that blend, that's our best wine. That's us putting our best foot forward.
Yes.
We need to have the best components on the table.
Absolutely.
For that, creating that blend.
And you know, you've been through enough of these blending tastings. Every time I'll try and sneak a little B grade in there, and you can tell immediately. So, but when you're dealing with something like Brut Rosé and you need that pop of fruit,
that wine's all about fruit.
It's all about fruit, and that's the benefit of working with so many different clones and blocks of Pinot Noir. Is I call it the pinosity, right?
Yeah.
How
the typicity of
the
Pinot
typicity
Noir.
of Pinot Noir and how it shows here. So how do we look at that and say, these are the wines that need to be on the table when we're crafting these wines? So with that, I think we should start getting into some tasting, because I know
I've been slowly sipping on some wine.
We're a little thirsty.
Yeah, I think it's time we talk about some wine now. We've been talking about vineyards. We've been talking about winemaking. You need a little more.
A little refresh. So.
But yeah, we've been talking about wine a lot. Let's start drinking some wine and chatting about what we're drinking.
Yeah. So the first wine that's going to be on glass here for us is our Blanc de Noir Rosé. And I mentioned that pinosity, that typicity of Pinot Noir here. This should be that. When we sit down to blend this wine, this red fruit should jump right out of the glass at you. It's like strawberry shortcake.
This is one that screams Pinot Noir. It has got that red fruit. It's luxurious.
Undeniably Pinot Noir, undeniably luxurious. Should be very soft, should be elegant, should be long, should have that lengthy finish, but really crisp acidity, right? This is one you can sit out on a porch and...
This is one I can...
Oh, yeah.
It's a dangerous wine. It's one that it goes down a little too smooth.
It's so refreshing that it keeps you going back for more.
And it makes your mouth really water after. You want to come back for another sip. It's one of those ones that's, it's juicy. It's a juicy red fruit. It's got that huge strawberry character that just screams Pinot Noir.
Yes.
So you want to talk about the winemaking of this? What goes... the behind the scenes, what makes this wine?
So we make 18 different sparklings here, and a lot of them are innovative, and it's very hard. So what I look for when we're making the Blanc de Noir is that Pinot Noir signature. It's when we sit down and we do this grading, it's if there's Pinot Noir that exhibits a little bit of a mineral character or some white flower, we know that's probably not going to be in our Blanc de Noir. It's going to go something more towards Royal Cuvée or Carneros Cuvée, where it adds complexity. Here we should have the wines that, it usually comes, I find a lot from Circle Bar, the wines that go into Blanc de Noir, because you get a little bit more of a ripe character over there from the time that we have to hang. So we get wines that exhibit much more of that fruit. it is very, it's
extra
a pop.
5 or 6
It's
days
that extra,
that makes a huge difference.
exactly, but you still get that soft tannin structure. So making a wine like this, when it has a little bit of color, you have to be very careful.
Yeah.
So because with color comes some tannin, comes some astringency,
Yeah,
and
you gotta squeeze the grapes a little bit harder.
a little bit.
Yeah.
So we got to dial that in. So what we're looking for when we're making the rosés is we still need to maintain that Gloria Ferrer elegance, that Gloria Ferrer purity of fruit, but it needs to exhibit some structure, and that's where we use the Chardonnay. So this is about 92% Pinot Noir, 8% Chardonnay, and we use that Chardonnay just to add a little bit of length to the finish, a little bit of weight to the palate. Where that Pinot is the star, that Chardonnay plays a great supporting role to just carry the finish all the way through on this wine.
Gives it a little backbone too, because that Pinot Noir can be it's a wimpy grape out in the vineyard. It can be a little bit wimpy in the wine glass.
It can be lighter.
The Chardonnay gives it a little punch.
It needs some help.
It gives it some weight, but it's still, this is all about Pinot. This is the Pinot show. Right
This is your signature right here.
And this is something that, Pinot Noir is in our DNA here. This is what we do. This is a wine that is, to me, screams Gloria Ferrer.
Yep.
This is a wine that's all about the purity of fruit. It's got great concentration of flavor. We talked about it being lively earlier. Literally jumps out of the glass. It's like fresh cut strawberries.
Yep.
It jumps out of the glass. It's one that for me is something that I just want to finish the glass immediately. But we got one
more wine to talk about. So let's
pop that one open.
Yep. So as that wine is all about Pinot Noir, this wine should be more about the house style and the aging character of this wine. You're going to have, we are still Pinot Noir dominant with the Sonoma Brut here, but you're looking at more 88% Pinot Noir, 12% Chardonnay. So it's not that big of a difference.
No.
When we're talking about percentages.
No, it's not.
But when we taste these wines side by side, they could not be more different. Take a look. I mean, even just the color in the glass, they are completely different colors. This is more along that traditional Brut color. When we're talking, the other one has a little bit of color there. Blanc de Noir with a little bit of color, but this has that really toasty note.
Look at those bubbles. That's a Gloria Ferrer sparkling wine when the bubbles just don't quit.
The mousse that stays forever.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. That's one of those ones you're right, it's crazy because the blend is so similar percentage-wise, but your tools that you have to work with can end with such a different product because when you have those base wines and you're putting the blending together,
yep,
your goals are so different for this wine. So you're looking for Pinot Noir lots that are way different than you would for the Blanc de Noirs rosé. This is something that's totally different. It's got a little bit more of that Chardonnay character,
yep,
more of that citrus, green apple type character.
Yep.
It's got a little bit of that yeast character from that bottle aging time.
Yep, it carries it. The Chardonnay really just carries you through that aging time there, and also just looking at the components of Pinot Noir that are in there, we tend to get more from that center part of the home ranch here, maybe just below the center part of the home ranch.
Yeah.
We're not in that concentrated, juicy fruit, red fruit jump out of the glass at you.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking for that more elegant, structured Pinot that has a little bit of a longer finish to it.
Some of those spots down by the lower part of the
Yep,
property get a little bit colder at night.
Yep.
Maybe that red fruit doesn't jump out.
And it just retains that nice acidity that's firm, but very soft.
Pleasant.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But still, those characters that make it a Gloria Ferrer sparkling wine are still there. Tons of fruit.
Purity of fruit.
Tons of concentration.
A sense of place. Elegance.
That elegance is there. It's really a wonderful job. You guys knocked it out of the park with both of these wines.
So
I'm really happy with how they turned out.
They're fun wines to make, and it starts in the vineyard and ends with what we drink in the glass. All right, so we have some questions coming in here. What clones do we have? What clones do we not have?
Yeah, that's a better question. So I always take some of my other people in the industry, let's say, out into the vineyards, and they're just blown away by our the clonal selection, especially for Pinot Noir that we have here. We have a lot of clones here that you would be hard pressed to find anywhere else in California. Not just our Gloria Ferrer clones, but some of the heritage clones that we have as well. It's important to take a historical perspective and remember that in the grand scheme of things, the California wine industry is not super old.
No, we're still infants.
We're still young in the sense of like a European wine region, and it's one of those things where Pinot Noir was brought in probably pre-Prohibition, but
Yes.
After Prohibition and after World War II, when the wine industry started picking back up, we only had a handful of clones to choose from. We refer to those as our heritage clones. Those are clones like Martini, Pommard. Those are clones like Waddensville. We have some heritage Massal selections as well planted on the property. Colmar 538. Then we kind of got some of the Dijon clones, which were more of the clones from Burgundy that were brought in. And those are consistent quality clones. We have some of those planted as well.
777, 115.
All of those, 667. Those are all clones that were brought in and continue to produce high quality wines all over the state. And then we also, like Kyle mentioned, the Gloria Ferrer team traveled to Champagne and they brought back these 12 Pinot and 6 Chardonnay clones that are sparkling Champagne clones. And those clones are really the bread and butter of what make our wines special. And by the time those clones got approved, there's a whole process to get them over here. You have to get them through quarantine. Then you have to replicate them enough times to plant a whole vineyard. Remember, we don't plant vineyards with seeds. We take cuttings. We take cuttings of
Propagate
the
plant
sticks.
for plant.
Yep, and we graft them onto rootstock. So you have to make enough budwood to be able to plant a whole vineyard. And so it took a long time for these clones to be able to produce actual production-sized vineyards. And so by the time that happened, all of our vineyards had already been planted. So now we're 40 years in, we're starting to replant. Some of these vineyards are coming to the end of their productive life where the quality might start to come down a little bit. It might have problems with disease, the wrong rootstocks were used. There's a lot of problems that can happen along the way. And that vineyard will get pulled out and we're able to replant. And when we're replanting, we're planting with these sparkling wine clones, which are producing phenomenal quality year after year.
And I can tell you from a winemaking perspective and you know, kind of looking at this through a different lens is I started making sparkling wine in 2018, 2017, and I'd only ever had still wine clones to work with from the places that I was making sparkling wine. And I was so used to having to manipulate these wines and find them and take things out and being like, man, that's really aggressive. There's too much color. I can't do that. You know, this is not making a wine that I think is representative of what sparkling wine actually is. And then coming here for the first harvest here that I had, and I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
There's no astringency. There's no color. There's no bitterness. It's fantastic to have these clones that are for this purpose.
In another masterclass, we'll dive a little bit deeper into the viticulture and what goes into the clones.
Yep.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that in depth. But I think the important thing to know is that these clones are selected for qualities out in the vineyard. When they found these clones, when they made these selections, they're looking for qualities that are beneficial for sparkling wine production versus still wine production. So less color, less tannin, more acidity, longer ripening period, more vigorous perhaps to protect the fruit from rain and to protect it from sunlight and sunburn. So these are all qualities that are beneficial for sparkling wine production that may not be beneficial for still wine production.
It'd be very hard to make a quality still wine out of sparkling wine clones.
So that's why it's important that we're using these clones and continuing to plant them and making that commitment. And that's why being estate grown is important, because we can't just go out and buy these grapes.
You can't find them.
They don't exist out in the world. If you were a Farmer Joe down the road, you're not going to plant these clones because we're the only ones that would be buying the grapes from them.
Correct.
You couldn't sell them to any producer producing red wine or white wine from the Chardonnay or Pinot Noir from these clones. So.
Awesome. Well, that is all the questions we have for today. So we're very happy to have you here for the Gloria Ferrer Masterclass. And with that, we will send you off with a thank you for all of your support.
Cheers. Yeah. Salud.
Cheers. Don't forget, we have a next masterclass on October 10th. We're going to get real deep into the history. We're going to get real deep into the evolution of style. We're going to tell some stories.
Yeah.
We're going to taste some of our Icon Series wines.
Talk about Harvest a little bit and how that
Harvest, Icon Series like Royal Cuvée and Royal Cuvée Rosé. And we're going to be having a lot of fun. So tune in with us on October 10th, and we'll see you there.
Cheers.